All right. Hello, I'm Gregory Bastianelli. Most of you know me. Yes, as Nick mentioned, this is my fourth novel, Shadow Flicker, which just came out in March. My first novel was Joker's Club. It came out in 2011, followed by Loonies in 2015, Snowball in 2020, just in time for the pandemic, and then Shadow Flicker this year. So yeah, when Snowball came out, it was difficult. I did a event at Water Street Bookstore and one other event. The book came out at the end of January. I did 2 events in February, and then I had a whole slate of events planned for the whole entire year to promote the book, including a trip to England. And every single thing planned, obviously, was canceled. So I didn't get to promote that book as thoroughly, at least in person, as I wanted to. I did some online Zoom events with a local bookstore and a podcast, which I'd never done before. So it was a little different doing those kind of events as opposed to live in front of real people. Anyway, so Shadow Flicker. A few years ago, I was reading an article in the Boston Globe about wind turbines in Massachusetts, and specifically there was a neighborhood in Massachusetts where people were complaining about some of the ill effects they felt they were suffering from wind turbines, from both the shadow flicker effect, which is when the sun is cast through the rotating blades, it creates almost like a strobe-like effect, to the noise, the sort of subtle noise of the constant motion of the turbines. So I read that article and it was kind of fascinating, and I like what a lot of writers do when they read something interesting, they file it away, maybe make a little, jot down a note in a notebook, and they think, that's interesting, maybe there's something I can do with that. And that's something like that usually gestates for maybe a couple of years, and then at some point, something goes off in your head and say, yeah, I can do something with that. So I did. So I wrote this book. I exaggerated the effects of the shadow flicker, though I did, when I was researching it, I went online, I actually watched some YouTube videos of people who had filmed the shadow flicker effect as it was going on. And these was like little 2-minute videos, and I'd watch that and I'd say, wow, it's already annoying me after just 2 minutes. I can't imagine hours or however long it lasts in some of these places dealing with that. It would drive anyone crazy. And it does drive a few people crazy in this book. But there's other things going on with the turbines. So this book kind of takes a left turn somewhere. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the first chapter, and then I can open up to any questions on either this or any of my books, or me, or anything. So this book takes place on a fictional island, Kidney Island, off the coast of Maine. There's like more than 4,000 islands off the coast of Maine, but there is no Kidney Island. So don't go looking for it. And if you find it, remember I warned you. Anyway, so this is the first chapter. The dandelions almost killed the old man. Melody Larson hauled her laundry basket out to the clothesline late one Saturday afternoon that spring. The forecast promised a warm, sunny day and hadn't disappointed. A slight breeze curled over the hills to the northeast on Kidney Island, and Melody liked to believe it came from the Bay of Fundy and not from those infernal wind turbines about 1,000 yards from her farmhouse. She waited as late in the day as possible before coming outside to hang the laundry, so the sun would be higher in the sky and she could avoid the shadow effects the rotating propellers of the turbines cast over the landscape. She didn't want to step outside the house till then, not that it was any better inside. As Melody began hanging the sheets she had stripped from her bed, the thought of how much she desired to slip back under them once they were dry. The Egyptian cotton sheets provided her the most comfort these days. Drying them under the warm sunshine and cool, salty air of the island became something she looked forward to after the long winter. The clothes dryer never left them with that same feeling of comfort. Of course, the comfort she pined for under those sheets in her bed pertained to sleep, much to the chagrin of her husband, Miles, who hoped for something more he'd rather enjoy in those soft threads, but it was not what Melody desired. and the sleep she so craved had been difficult to come by these days. The soft grinding as the wind turbines went through their rotation pierced her veil of sleep, leaving her exhausted every morning. As she clipped each end of a sheet to the rope with a wooden clothespin, she spied her elderly father in the middle of the backyard and smiled. He still worked as hard on the Darrow farm as she remembered growing up here, even though their agricultural output had shrunk to a fraction of what the old man and his father and grandfather before him had built up on the island. That made her sad thinking of it, but she still managed to smile seeing him tending to the land even well into his 70s. Tyrus Darrow carried 2 objects as he shuffled at a slow, halting pace around the lawn of the backyard. In his left hand, he held a steel pail by its thin handle. His right hand grasped a long metal implement used for digging dandelions out by their roots. Every time he came to an outcropping of the yellow-flowered weeds, and there were no shortage of them scattered throughout the green grass, he'd set the pail down and stick the bottom of the tool into the ground around the leaves of the dandelion. He stepped on the metal foothold at the base, allowing the tip to dig into the ground under the plant's roots. He rocked the tool back and lifted, its prongs pulling up the weed. Of course, Tyrus didn't think of the plant as a weed. To him, it was sustenance. The greens he'd wash and bundle up to sell at the family farm stand at the end of the property by the road. The yellow heads of the dandelions would go into the barn, where he'd put them into the press to make dandelion wine. It was probably the last bit of joy Melody's father got out of what remained of their farm, and she watched him with a touch of sadness. The hum from the wind turbines reminded her of what they gave up. Not that the sound didn't annoy her, but its constant vibration in her ears served as a reminder that it was she who had convinced Tyrus to sell the acreage they could no longer maintain to AeroSource, the energy company that installed the turbines. Her father met her suggestion with reluctance, but at his age, she thought it would really only be her future that would be affected by the decision. How wrong she had been about that. Melody continued pinning sheets and pillowcases to the lines, this time the bedding from her 2 kids. She kept one eye on her father, knowing his footing wasn't quite what it used to be. She always dreaded the possibility of him taking a tumble and cracking his fragile bones. He seemed strong enough to have many years left in him, but she still worried. Once Tyrus filled his pail to the brim, he brought the bucket over to the picnic table on their back patio, setting it down on top and laying the tool on the ground beside it. She watched as he began separating the yellow dandelion heads from their stems and putting them in one pile, the greens in another. Melody smiled and reached down to grab another pillowcase. Her gaze only left him for a second. When she straightened up and clipped the pillowcase to the clothesline, she glanced over at the patio. Her mouth opened, her eyes widened. Tyrus sat at the picnic table with a pile of dandelion heads in front of him. He plucked one yellow flower out of the pile and popped it into his mouth. At first, Melody wasn't sure she saw correctly. Maybe he had pulled some kind of snack out of his pants pocket, nuts or something. But as she watched, pausing from her chore, she saw him pick up another dandelion head and stuff it into his mouth, his jaws churning as he chewed. "Dad?" Melody stood stunned, not comprehending what her eyes observed. Her mind tried reasoning that maybe he enjoyed the taste of dandelions before, or maybe he always sampled the latest crop to make sure it was suitable for winemaking. But as she watched, he continued stuffing dandelion after dandelion into his mouth, his eyes a vacant stare as if in some kind of trance. "Dad," she cried, running across the yard, calling out again, though he acted as if he didn't hear or see her. By the time she got to the picnic table, she had no idea how many of the dandelions he had stuffed in his mouth, but the pile in front of him had been nearly depleted. He began choking. "Dad," she screamed at his side, taking hold of his right arm, which tried to reach out and pick up another dandelion despite his gagging sounds. "What are you doing?" His head turned, face still gripped in a dazed expression and becoming flush as he looked up at her. His face bulged out like a squirrel whose cheeks were stuffed with nuts, his mouth opening to reveal a yellow morass coating his lips and tongue. He tried to speak, but only emitted choking sounds. His eyes looked glazed. Melody began shaking him. "Spit it out," she cried. No, yelled at him. He sputtered, his Adam's apple bobbing in the floppy skin of his neck. He attempted to cough, but only a muffled sound came out. His face drained of color. "Jesus, Dad," she squealed. Panic took hold of her. She pounded on his back as he hunched over, but the choking sounds persisted. Melody got behind him, bringing her arms around him, making a fist with her right hand and wrapping her left hand around it. She felt around for the middle of his paunch and then leaned into his back. With all her strength, she pulled her arms back, driving her fist into his gut. His body lurched up off the seat from the force, but the gagging sounds persisted. Please, God, she said in a panicked voice. Please help me. She pulled her fist in again. His body jerked, and she thought she heard a gurgling sound from his throat. Again, she thought, bracing herself, worried if she didn't get his airway cleared, he would pass out and top off the table, taking her with him. She tugged hard, ramming her fist into his gut with all her might. A sound erupted from his open mouth, followed by a geyser of yellow, sticky, coagulated substance that spewed across the top of the picnic table. Tyrus Darrow's shoulders slumped, and as Melody relaxed, the muscles in her arms, back, and legs that had been bracing herself behind him let go. The old man pitched forward, his head falling to the tabletop, his face landing in the gooey yellow mess. Behind them, the sound of the wind turbines continued to whirl and hum. Well, for a small fee, you can purchase a book and find out what happens. I'll sign it to whoever buys a book. Any questions?
So that moment he lived.
At that moment, he is alive, yes. Okay. I can't say what happens to him later on.
Okay, I just want to know in that moment, the daughter, the panicked daughter, had a moment of relief.
Yes, yes. Yeah.
I guess so. Yeah, was that what part of that was the first?
That was the opening chapter, yes. Yes, yes.
Yeah, because the late comer beats the
Yeah, yeah. Well, I didn't want to read the end of the book because, I like to leave a few surprises.
We'd be lost. There was also a surprise. The main character. Don't reveal anything.
What? There is a surprise book? Oh. Those who have read part of the book shouldn't. No spoilers. No spoilers, please. Yes. There's plenty of surprises galore. How did I get into writing? Well, actually, when I was in 6th grade at Woodman Park School, my class had a writing assignment. We were split into groups of 5, and we were given an opening paragraph and told to write a story based on that opening paragraph. And collaborating is not an easy thing, even as a kid. So my group of 5 couldn't decide what direction we wanted to take this opening paragraph. So we went to the teacher and we said, can we split up and do our own thing? She said, sure. So 2 people paired off. I went off by myself and wrote the story I wanted to write, which was full of dinosaurs and lava and volcanic eruptions and stuff like that. And I won first prize in the contest. All the works were judged by another classroom, and I won the first prize. And that was the first story I ever wrote. And ever since then, I said, this is fun. I like to do this. And I started writing back then. I was 11 and kept on writing. Took a while to get to this point, but perseverance pays off eventually. Somewhere, I might even have that story in a notebook somewhere.
You write every day. How do you work?
My goal is to try and write every day. I figure at least if I try every day, the days I don't succeed, at least there'll be hopefully more days that I do succeed than not succeed. Some books flowed more easier than others, and I was able to commit to just writing every day. Some there might be a little bit of struggle, so there might be I might need a day off and say I can't deal with it today. I don't outline my books, so some writers like to outline their books from beginning to end before they even start. I don't do that. I take a lot of notes about what might happen in my book, but I pick a beginning point and I just see where it takes me. It's almost like entering a labyrinth, and I don't know where to go, but I know I need to find the way out. So I might take some wrong turns, I might hit some dead ends, but if I keep working my way through the labyrinth, eventually I'll get to the end and find my way out. Well, there's no paper involved anymore. Everything's done electronically. Yeah, I mean, there are some writers who still write first drafts by hand. I write everything on my computer, though I would like to try to attempt writing by hand a first draft of a novel. I do write short stories by hand, but problem is I can sometimes barely read what I've written, and I fear with a short story I can deal with it, missing a few lines here and there. But if I was to write a whole book by longhand and then go back and not understand what I'd written half of it, that might be troubling. So. Yeah. Mhm. No, I used to always play music when I write, and but lately I've been kind of backing off that. The music never used to distract me, but now if I play music, I start to, pay more attention to the music than what I'm putting down on paper. So lately I've been writing without music, but I used to always write to music. That's right. Yeah, I need my little time. I figure even if I try to carve out at least anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half, but even if I only get a half hour and I write one page in a half an hour, that's one page more than I toward the end. So.
You try to do it at a certain time of day, or is that too hard?
Well, obviously, I'd love to just get up in the morning and write, but I have a job to go to, so yeah. So it's usually later in the evening after things quiet down. Dinner's done, dishes are done, chores are done.
So how much research did you do for this book compared to the
Probably more with this book than any of the others. Just to learn about the effects of shadow flicker and what actually what it does to some people that live near it and complain about it, and just the whole way of a wind turbine works and stuff like that. So yeah, I did a little more research with this one because I wasn't that familiar with the whole wind turbine concept and how things work. And of course, I went out to go actually experience a wind turbine, and there's one in Newburyport, and I went out there, and it wasn't even turning. I was like, oh, great, I came all the way out here, and the blades weren't turning. I said, okay, wasted trip.
You didn't do your research before you went.
Yeah, so I should have checked the wind currents in the area.
And then you did some research of the location that the story is based.
Yeah, the island that it's set on is sort of based on two islands that I've visited. One actually off the coast of Maine, Vinyl Haven, which is off of Rockland. That was sort of my main point of reference for the island. And the island in this book is set off of Rockland, Maine. But I also combine elements of Catalina Island off the coast of California, some of the conservation area of the aspects of the island. But mostly Vinyl Haven was sort of the model for the island. And I went out there a few years ago and explored quite a bit of it. And there's actually 3 wind turbines on the island that look just like this, hovering in the background.
And if that book becomes a bestseller, then the island's going to be thronged and they're going to complain.
They're going to complain about me. No, there's a disclaimer in the beginning about, this is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and instances are a product of the author's imaginations. Locales and public names are sometimes used for atmospheric purposes. So I'm covered.
How about your character development? Did you have an affinity for a particular character, or did you have a hard time with some?
That's always the hardest part. Who are you going to tell your story through? My main character is an insurance investigator who goes is sent to the island to document the effects that neighbors of the turbines are having. There's other characters that the story's told through as well, but he's the main character throughout the story. It's really his story, what he's experiencing as he's investigating this phenomena on the island. Yeah, it's always tough. That's where the hardest work comes in. Is who's your character going to be? What's he going to be like, he or she, and what they're all going to be all about.
Do you draw from people you know or experience?
I try not. I try not to, because then I'm afraid of people coming up and saying, "Is that me? Are you writing about me?" So I try not to. I don't even like using names of people I know, because in my first book I had a very minor character, and I had two people who had that same name come up to me and say, "Was that me you're writing about?" No. Why'd you make me a floozy? It's not you. So I try to actually, I compile lists of names and stuff, and I try to always use names of nobody I know. It's hard, but that's what I try. So.
And didn't you have a unique way of choosing names, I think, for the second book? I don't know if you still do this, but you still use that system?
Yes, I have access to names in my job of employment, and when I come across interesting names, I jot them down. So I keep running lists of interesting names. Not just interesting names, but it could be just common names. But I don't want like soap opera sounding names. I want real people names as best I can. For Loonies, it's a book about a very strange town, so I wanted a lot of strange names. So I collected a lot of unusual kinds of names because I wanted that feel for the town in the book.
And after I read it, I complained to him that those were ridiculous names and nobody had names like that.
And they were they were all real names of real people. And believe me, some of the names I see, I couldn't use. Yes, I've been, ever since that first story of dinosaurs in the underground world, all my stories have really, followed along that kind of weird and horror and unusual. Loonies is probably my least, it's really a mystery, but it's kind of I call it a dark mystery because it's kind of not just a typical cozy mystery. It's a sort of a dark, creepy mystery, and it's not just one mystery. The book is full of layers of mysteries throughout this one little town that all get triggered by one event.
I always find it interesting because your books don't. How I know you, it just doesn't match your stories. It's just such a dichotomy.
The man behind the mask.
Yes. What else don't I know about you?
Oh, there's a lot. It goes deep.
Can you tell us about the influence of some of your favorite authors?
Yeah. Probably my first favorite writer when I was very young was Ray Bradbury, and I always liked the way he told stories, and I always liked they're always set in the small town that we grew up, kind of similar to the kind of town we grew up in, a small little town, and they were very nostalgic, and I like that. I try to incorporate that a lot of the feel of that in Joker's Club, but that was, I just like the way he write, the sort of the poetic way he used words, and just the feel of everyday life that he encapsulated in his stories. And then from there, I went on to discover Richard Matheson, who wrote a lot of horror and science fiction stories in the 50s. He wrote I Am Legend, and he wrote Somewhere in Time. A lot of his stuff was made into movies. People are more familiar with the movies than the actual books he wrote. He wrote Hell House. which was made into a movie. He wrote The Incredible Shrinking Man, which was made into a movie. So he was a big influence. And then from there, I moved on to Stephen King when he came out. And of course, he was the master. He became the master of horror for a good reason. He was writing the best horror stories. So just about every horror author always praises his influence. I've been to a couple of events that he's been at years ago. Yeah. He's a little weird. He's a little weird. Yeah. His son is a little weird too. I've met his son, who's also an author and actually lives in Exeter, and he writes very. His imagination actually might be a little more disturbing than his father's. Yeah, a little wilder than his father's. So.
Well, he needed to distinguish himself.
Yes, yes.
Do you feel like that's kind of something that you focus on when you're writing, like how much can I put in to get people's attention and really get them like wowed, or is it like you have to restrict yourself a little?
Well, I mean, I certainly don't want the reader to be bored, so I'm hoping I'm not boring the reader. I just let the story play out the way it plays out as I'm writing it, and I have some ideas of things that are going to happen, but a lot of times there are things that surprise me that happen. In my novel Snowball, I had it's about a bunch of people who are trapped on a highway during a blizzard on Christmas Eve, and they're stuck there, and there's no help coming, and weird things are going on outside in the storm. And so I had a variety of different people who were trapped on this highway, and one of them was a very minor character. He was a truck driver, and I didn't really know what to do with him, but I figured, well, he's just a small little character, and we'll see what happens to him. And so I had a lot of stuff happen to all the other characters, but every now and then, when I would have something happen to some of the more main characters, I'd want to leave you kind of hanging. So I'd say, well, where can I go? I'll have this happen and then jump somewhere else. Well, let's go back to this truck driver who's just sitting in his truck. And then I can make a break, and then people will say, well, what's going on with those people? Why are we bothering this truck driver? But then things started happening with the truck driver, and he started becoming more and more involved in the story. And soon this minor character actually ends up having one of the biggest roles in the story. And that was totally unplanned. It just happened that way. I made the right turn in the labyrinth and found him and ran with it. So things like that are nice. They're surprising, and that's kind of the magic of writing.
Will you ever write a second book taking on from one of your first books?
I have no plans to. I know some of my books might leave people, the endings might leave them a little wanting more, but sometimes that's the way I like them to end. But if I ever was to revisit, the only thing I've thought of is Loonies, because I like the town of weird people that I created and the mystery that I created. And if I ever came up with because the town is still full of loonies, and you don't know who's loonies and who's not. And some of the normal people are loonies, and some of the loonies are normal people. But I've thought sometime that I could revisit that town and maybe write another. If I had another compelling, mysterious story that I could tell through those characters, and I even know the title would be called Loonies 2, T-O-O, Loonies 2. Any other questions?
Did you write all those books in order? As you were writing Joker's Club, did you have Loonies in mind?
No, I actually, after I finished Joker's Club, I wrote another book and presented it to my publisher, and they didn't like it. And that happens. So I put that one aside, and at the time, and then I started Loonies. And then I did follow up Loonies with Snowball. And then after Snowball, I wrote 2 other books, which still have yet to be, 2 other books that still have yet to see the light of day. Both of them are actually with my publisher, but they haven't made a decision yet, so I'm hoping. And then after those 2, I moved on to Shadow Flicker. I found time I finished Shadow Flicker actually during the pandemic. And when I was home, when everything was shut down and I was home, I was able to finish it up. And when I got done, I felt like I needed a little break because I'd written like 4 novels, like boom, 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 one right after another. So I said, I'll take a little break. But after a week, I had an idea. And I said, I'm home, I'm not working, might as well do something. So I started, a week later after finishing Shadow Flicker, I started another book. And then I was about a week or 2 into it, work called and said, okay, time to come back. And I was like, no, I need more time. But I did finish that one, and that one is still sitting around. So I've got 4 manuscripts that I've done besides these. And I'm working on another new one right now. So.
And when do you find time to write the short stories? What can you tell us about
it's funny because I used to always love writing short stories, and I've written, a handful. But the last few years, I've done very little short story writing. It's been kind of hard to, I don't know, I've written a couple and ones that I really like, but I haven't been as excited about short stories lately, probably because I have all these other ideas. Originally, a couple of my manuscripts that are unpublished were actually going to be short stories. And then as I started writing them, I thought, oh, wait a minute, there's way more here than just a short story. So 2 of them actually turned into, 3 of them actually turned into novels. So that were originally planned to be short stories. Anybody else? All right, well, I have books for sale for those who are looking to purchase books, and I'm happy to sign them. And thank you all for coming.